It would be very helpful if you first try to solve the problem yourself before watching this video.
Question 59. The line x is equal to is a vertical asymptote to the graph of g. If g is greater than 0 for all x except x is equal to, which of the following must be true? So let's draw the graph of g roughly. Here, what we know is we have a vertical asymptote at x equal to, and g is positive for all x, right? Except x is equal to. So we could have this type of graph. G approaches positive infinity as x approaches negative from left hand side, and g also approaches positive infinity as x approaches 2 from right hand side, right? We cannot draw like this, right? Because it says that g is positive for all x. Okay, so we must have g above the x-axis. Does that make sense? Okay, answer choice A. G of 2 exists. No, that's not true, right? Because we have a vertical asymptote at x equal 2. That means g of 2 is not defined. So that's not true. The answer choice B. As x approaches infinity, g of x is equal to. Well, x approaches infinity has to do with the horizontal asymptote of the function, right? Is the horizontal asymptote of the graph of g is always equal to 2? No, right? We could have, let's say for example, let's say here is 1. So we could have a horizontal at y equal 1, right? Like this. Does that make sense? So this is not always equal to 2. Okay, now answer choice C. G has exactly one horizontal asymptote. We could have one horizontal asymptote, or we could have no horizontal asymptote, or we could have more than one horizontal asymptote, which means 2 horizontal asymptotes. We could have this graph, right? Let's say this approaches 0 as x approaches negative infinity. Then if we have this type of graph, horizontal asymptote is y is equal to 1, right? And y is equal to 0, right? We could have 2 horizontal asymptotes. So that's not always true, right? Okay, answer choice D. As x approaches 2 from left hand side, 2 from right hand side, right? G of x is equal to infinity. That is true, right? We have a vertical asymptote here. Then graph has to, follow this vertical asymptote. Since g is positive for all x, this graph goes up like this from left hand side. Also from right hand side, the graph has to go like this, right? So as x approaches 2 from left hand side and right hand side, g of x approaches positive infinity. That's true, right? So the answer has to be D.